Salmon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Thank you, Jim.
Stewart, what does the BC election mean to natural resource development?
Well, this is a question lots of people have because there's change. And then anytime there's a change, you want to figure out what it means. People in industry need to know the world's watching Canada because Canada is a great supplier of the commodities that are used all over the world to manufacture things. Sometimes we buy those things back, but they also go all over to the rest of the world in the products that are made. And so it's an important event when British Columbia has a change of government. This change is not an enormous one in some ways. I mean, if you just look, well, it was the NDP last week with the Green Party support. Now it's the NDP, but it's a huge change because it's a majority, significant majority government, looks like, for the NDP, and they don't have to rely on the BC Green Party. So it would be reasonable to ask, what does this mean? What does it mean for natural resources and investment? You know, I think the government, which obviously rode into the election campaign feeling pretty confident, they were certainly signaling during the campaign that don't worry, natural resource industries, we've got your back. We're going to be here for you. There was a recent poll we saw telling us that 93% of BC residents see resources as a very important part of the future economy, so forestry, mining, and energy in particular. So there's very strong support out there, and people get that. And in times gone by, you would have expected that if people had that strong view, they would vote for a party that has, the BC Liberal Party, that has more strongly associated around that message rather than the NDP, which has been painted for, many years, as being opposed to it. But I think this NDP government has come out of the starting blocks, pretty firmly saying, no, we understand what's needed for a strong economy. We're going to be the ones to make sure that things happen, that the mining industry, forest industry, LNG. I think they're even kind of pragmatic about the fact they're next door to the oil sands of Alberta, and those oil sands products need to get to markets, and that includes being able to get through BC to the ocean. I think there is a kind of practical approach to dealing with this inside government, regardless of what the messaging may be on any given day. But, when you get into the details, of course, that's always where the devil is. I think mining, just in the last week of the election, we saw the Mining Association of British Columbia come out with kind of surprising timing, but carefully chosen to say, look, if you want to see a healthy mining sector in BC, and I don't just mean the mining finance people of downtown Vancouver, I'm talking about the 14 operating mines in BC. If you want to have those replaced over time with new mines, we need to send a signal to investors that BC is a place where you can have some certainty. And right now there's a lack of certainty, according to the Mining Association, that stems from carbon tax, because they say that not just some, but all of the jurisdictions that British Columbia competes with do not face the same costs that come from British Columbia's carbon tax. So they're pointed to 46 national and 32 subnational jurisdictions, states or provinces, that have a price on carbon, and BC's carbon tax is among the highest in the world. And in all those jurisdictions with carbon pricing, except BC, there's what the miners call meaningful support for their mining industries. So they give the industry a break because they don't want those mining jobs to go somewhere else in search of lower costs. So particularly in the pandemic period where economic recovery is going to be the thing. I mean, if we're looking at a $20 billion deficit, I mean, that was unthinkable a year ago. If you said that could happen in BC, you know, no one would take you seriously. Now it's what we're headed for. In these circumstances, something has got to be there to pay for it all, and mining is one, along with forestry, a huge employer in BC, and natural gas is a big one as well. And so we want to have it healthy. So I would suspect that there's a discussion in the new government as they start to form who's going into what cabinet posts and what mandate letter will greet them when they are sworn into those jobs. And whoever's got the energy and mining portfolio, and that's traditionally been one portfolio in BC, is going to be dealing with this. It's going to be an important job. You know, there's pressures from all over the place on increasing carbon taxes. There's a new federal low carbon fuel standard come in, which some compare to the equivalent of a much higher carbon tax put on top of the carbon tax we already have. So if Canada's the only one doing this because we want to be the Boy Scout and the whole world is not doing it, how exactly does that make global emissions go down? That would be one question that I think a reasonable person would ask. And meanwhile, if we've lost mining jobs, how are we going to pay for, you know, the basics? So Jim, that's probably an issue of importance right now. There's a couple of other ones I wanted to mention if we've got time.
We sure do, and we'll talk about some of them right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Value from success, growth in discovery. Golden Arrow Resources is a well-funded gold-copper exploration company with proven management and prospective properties in Chile, Argentina, and Paraguay. Golden Arrow trades on the Toronto Venture Exchange, symbol GRG, on Frankfurt, symbol G6A, and the OTCQB, symbol GARWF. For more information, visit us at goldenarrowresources.com or call Sean at 778-686-0135.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, the anti-fish farming lobby seems to have a very strong voice. And how important is fish farming to BC, and is it being done right?
Yeah, fish farming is, if you look at just direct employment, there's probably 6,000 or 7,000 people who work in it, largely on northern Vancouver Island where the fish farms are, but also the supply chain of goods and services. It actually stretches right into downtown Vancouver and into the suburbs of Vancouver. There's a big fish feed plant in Surrey that I know of, but lots of other stuff. And also, I don't know if everyone knows this, but the biggest freight item that goes through YVR is salmon, is farmed salmon. Now, I don't know whether that's true right now, if people aren't going to banquets in New Jersey and all over the place where that fish is flown to. So there could be some, you know, COVID-induced things, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's still a very large amount of that product going through at a time when other things, in particular passengers, have plummeted. So it does spread out through the economy. But I think when you say, okay, well, what about these concerns? You know, why do we have people like, Finn Donnelly, a former federal politician, now back in as an MLA in Greater Vancouver? Why does he want to get rid of salmon farmers? I think there's been campaigns over the years seeking to present science or an interpretation of science to say, look, here's why we shouldn't have salmon farms, because they hurt wild salmon. I mean, if these people really cared about wild salmon, why aren't they asking for wild salmon not to be caught and killed by fishermen? You know, when it comes, I mean, think about it. When you look at what happens on the land, we don't get all our meat for the table from deer running around, from venison. We get it from farms. And that is probably how we like it. When it comes to the ocean, it's almost the other way around, which always puzzles me when we know that we have endangered wild salmon runs. well, why are we fishing them then if they're endangered? But we do. And yet the farms, which are run safely, I mean, the science tells us that. Yes, there's always critics, which is good because it's led to the standards being increased. I mean, anyone in the salmon farming industry, and I've talked to lots of them, including scientists, will tell you that there was a time, 20 years ago. This is a new industry, relatively new industry in BC, but 20 years ago, yeah, it was pretty, ma and pa, and these operations hadn't been fully brought to where they should have been. And I think a lot of the reputation that to get some people vexed about it goes back to those bad old days. But that's not just not so anymore. First of all, it's regulation, but I think more importantly, the markets do want to have that product. People want to eat healthy fish. They do like having the regularity and product quality assurances around getting a certain product at a certain time from a certain supplier, and that's what farm salmon lets you do. And I think a lot of people, if you're not eating something that's called wild salmon, but you're eating something salmon on the menu, you're probably eating farm salmon. And I know there are those who say, I refuse to eat that farm salmon. It tastes awful. Well, anyone who's ever done a blind taste test in this area knows that you actually couldn't tell them apart. And, I mean, some people will say, no, you're wrong about that, Stu. Sorry about that. But, try it out. Try it at home. I challenge you. I think a lot of people would actually like the fattiness of farm salmon better. But, I mean, that's personal preference. And I know some people will say, oh, no, you don't know what you're talking about. But when it comes to the science, the people who do know what they're talking about in a scientific way have been working on this all the time. Occasionally there's some report that comes out that casts a little bit of a question over something, and all of a sudden you have, 5 environmental organizations screaming their heads off about it, but you actually read the scientific report in the journal where it's been published, and you realize, it's not really anything like it's being used to, create this political pressure. So I think there is pretty strong support for salmon farming. It's something that out of any economic activity that people in BC do, is probably the one that we could increase without the need for government subsidies that would almost instantaneously grow our economy and do so while protecting the environment. It's also a very green industry. It doesn't use a lot of energy inputs, which is supposed to be, I think everyone would agree, where we want to go. So it's got all these attributes, and it's something available. So I think, as long as...
How big of a chunk of the BC economy is it?
I think if you'd probably be looking, I don't know the GDP number, Jim, but I can tell you it is, salmon alone, farm salmon alone, is the largest agricultural export of British Columbia. If I quizzed you on that, you might say, oh, it's apples from the Okanagan, or wheat from Peace, or beef from the Caribou. In fact, it's farm salmon from the coast.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, Andrew Weaver, the former leader of the Green Party, who the NDP were in coalition with, was nicknamed Dr. No, because he didn't want to go with any kind of economic development project, it seemed. Is it a good thing now that they don't have to deal with the Greens to get something done?
Dr. Weaver was my MLA, and there were some issues where I didn't agree on him. I sat down with him once. We had a coffee. We sort of hashed a few things out. I left not agreeing with him on everything. But you know what? After his term in office, now that it's behind us and he's retired, you got to admire his legacy. He was pretty practical about things, and he was a kind of lonely fighter for what he believed in, and I just respect that hugely, what he did. You know, the other thing too is that there were some major projects, LNG Canada, Site C, lots of other things that when he had the lever of government, as it were, in the sense that the Greens could have, you know, led theoretically to a government collapse, although they had a contract. You know, he found a way to push for those things to match his environmental expectations. I think the regulations that were brought in were influenced by having Dr. Weaver in the legislature. You know, whether his successors will take the same approach, I think that towards the end, you know, he kind of lost touch with his own Green Caucus, which does raise questions about what their agenda is going to be. We haven't really seen them in action fully. I mean, there is a new leader, and Sonia Furstenau has been in the ledge for the same period of time that Andrew was. But we don't really know her as much as we knew, you know, the former leader. So that's a bit of a question mark. Hopefully it's practical and that, you know, if we have a system where anyone with questions, especially elected people who've been put in by voters, can be there to be a watchdog and ask questions, that's a healthy thing. But the government is the one that's got the sway. It's got the decisive power and seats in the House, and ultimately they'll be the ones who are accountable to the voters. So yeah, I do look back affectionately on the contributions that Andrew Weaver made in his time in office.
Do you think this NDP will be, first of all, it's the first NDP government to be re-elected in British Columbia. We know it was more of a referendum on how COVID's been handled with, but do you think they might have a different message or a different approach because the Liberals are in disarray, and it seems like it might be the time for them to maybe win a third election?
Yeah, well, I've talked to lots of NDP friends who assure me, you know, don't worry, we're going to be supportive. We know where the economy is based in British Columbia. It depends on natural resources. We need that to be healthy. That's, for me, as executive director of Resource Works, that's sort of my job. And they say, you know, don't worry. You know, there are certainly, you know, some signs that they have got internal party things to manage. I mean, that's always been the case, especially in the modern era where, inside the orange brand of the NDP, you've got the green and the brown, side, as it were. The brown, the earth, what once used to be called commonly the dirt ministries, as we said back in the newsroom, and the greens. I think the general weight of it now is more toward that. I mean, you don't really have the polarization because everyone wants to be green now and everyone tries to be. But doing the things we need, that are going to pay the bills and do so in the most environmentally high performance way that we can imagine and implement is going to be, you know, what everyone wants. Whether that's the oil sand. I mean, you look at the innovation that's been going on in Alberta. That's the story of 2021. I think that we're going to be hearing about where, you know, very quietly the oil sands, kind of like salmon farming, what I said about salmon farming. I mean, there was a time when the, you know, popular image some people still have today was actually based on something, but that time's in the past. You know, I mean, yeah, they have some struggles and they're working on that, but the amount of progress they've made is incredible and it deserves acknowledgement. And, you know, I think a government that is willing to be upfront about that and take leadership on it is going to be a successful one.
Before we go, Stewart, seismic concerns about the Peace River Site C dam project. Is this something that could stop it, or is it something that's fixable and let it go on?
Well, I think it was common knowledge before anything ever happened that the piece is in the geology that it's in, so that's not a surprise. I mean, I was up there in the early days of Site C just when construction was starting, and you could look up the hill from the river bottom and you could see, oh, that looks a bit sandy, but, you know, they had talked about that in the early days, and it looked like they understood what the issues were, and the engineers had applied their knowledge to it. You know, hydroengineering is one of the great branches of engineering. There are experts in this. I've known some over the years. who built dams all over the world, and these specialists, that's all they do. They go from one continent to another. Enormous amount of knowledge and practice that goes into this. There's nothing sort of accidental. So, yes, obviously there's some issues there that are being studied still for a while longer, and at the end of the process, we'll have the best knowledge. But still, I go back to the fact that we got to the point we're at now, with the advice of all of these international experts who understood the setting. It's not really a big media scoop to say that, this is on some sedimentary rock. Well, of course it is. It's in the piece. What did you think it was on? Everyone knew what the geology was. It didn't sort of change last week. So, it's quite mind-boggling to think that there could be a problem of such magnitude that the government would consider not doing the dam. That's truly unexpected, and we'll see if that's what it comes to. But I think that it's more likely that the engineers are quietly, calmly figuring this out, trying to establish why there's construction issues. There's a reason for everything. Things don't just happen magically or by accident. Figure out what the reason is and apply the remedy and move forward.
If they can build giant bridges and span islands in Japan, the world's most seismically active area, I think they can do it in the Peace River region.
Yes, one would think so. It's pretty calm and stable up there. We hear about seismicity because of the natural gas industry has placed high sensitivity sensors all over the place, and every time there's a 2.5, it's recorded or above. Tiny earthquakes you wouldn't even notice. Well, they're not earthquakes; they're just induced seismicity in some cases from fracking, which, by the way, is not even in the vicinity of the dam. So you can't. I know some people have said, it's because of fracking. No, it's got nothing to do with that. That's never been shown. And I believe it would be impossible if there's no fracking in the immediate area.
Stewart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks, Jim.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. If you have any questions for Stewart, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.